start recording, and we are going to jump right into chapter 25. Bursting from the cave, we see the eclipse is almost in full effect. The moon stretches across half the sun, casting long shadows throughout the quarry. We have to find the Tule Vieja, Etel Abuela. She'll be even more powerful after the eclipse is over. Then we'll never be able to stop her. Of course, mi niño, Abuela says, still unable to catch her breath. She's in no condition to fight a witch. I turn to Brandon's dad. Mr. Brandon's dad? Do you think you could take care of my Abuela? I don't think she's up for a fight. Brandon's dad reaches out to Abuela and she takes his arm. I notice a tattoo below the crook of his elbow reading USMC, United States Marine Corps. I know she'll be in good hands with a Marine, I tell him. Brandon's dad lowers his head and smiles. You sure you kids got this? Brandon's dad asks. He stretches his back and winces, rubbing an old scar at the base of his neck. You don't need any help from a worn-out Marine? I shake my head. We can do it, sir, but my Abuela really needs someone with her right now. Brandon's dad straightens his shoulders. I'll get her home, don't worry, and you kids be careful. That witch is one mean lady. Dale un chancletazo para mi niño, Abuela says. Dale un chancletazo. Chancletazo. I don't know what a chancletazo is. Does anybody know? A chancla is like a sandal. So I don't know. Brandon's dad, let's see. Abuela says, letting Brandon's dad lead her up and out of the quarry. Ciao, pescao. Y la vuelta, picadillo, I call after her. Maria Carmen, Talib, Brandon, and I crouched behind a pile of rocks on the quarry floor. The bear that was holding off the Tule Vieja is nowhere in sight. Are you really going to smack the Tule Vieja with a sandal, like your abuela said? Oh, it was a sandal, Maria Carmen asked, chuckling. Nah, I tell her, I left my smacking sandals at home. A squirrel runs up to us, panting and scratching at the ground. We've got her cornered up at the edge of the quarry. Hurry! Maria Carmen, Talib, and Brandon look at me, waiting for a squirrel translation. She's up there, I say, pointing above us to the woods. Let's get this over with, Talib says, pushing himself up from behind the rocks. Brandon grabs his arm. Wait, we shouldn't all come at her from the same direction. We should, what's the word, Nestor? Flank her. Yep, that's it. Let's flank her. Good plan, I tell him. Talib, you and Brandon go through the woods and come at the Tule Vieja from behind. Maria Carmen and I will come at her from here, right up out of the quarry. I'll show them the way, the squirrel says. I point to our furry friend and tell Talib and Brandon, just follow that squirrel. I'd like to follow a squirrel. Talib shakes his head. Just when you think it couldn't get any weirder. Brandon and Talib take off after the squirrel while Maria Carmen and I make our way across the quarry floor to the slope where we entered. I'm almost to the last pile of rocks when I'm knocked off my feet. I slam into the dirt, the breath sucked out of my lungs. I hear Maria Carmen shout, "Get away from him." I look up and see Miss Humala. Just wait, Nestor, she says, a little bit longer and the eclipse will be complete. She'll get what she wants and leave. She's already furious that you kept her from taking more animals. Just let her have a few more. I look past her into the sky. The moon has almost completely covered the sun. I'm not letting her hurt anyone else, I say. I stand, my back aching, and my hands bloodied from the gravel. I brush my palms on my jeans. We have to stop her, and you know it. Miss Humala charges at me again. Maria Carmen yanks my arm and pulls me out of the way. We scramble up the rock pile, away from Miss Humala. I know she's your mother, Maria Carmen says, but you can't just let her do this. Miss Humala pounds her fist into the rocks. I've been trying to stop her for years. I thought I could run away from her, but it was no use. But we can help you, I tell her. We can stop her together. Miss Humala shakes her head. You're fools. She's been doing this my whole life. Do you know what it's like being dragged everywhere across the globe while your mother chases eclipses? She's growing more and more powerful. She'll never stop. Her head snaps up at us, her eyes black and darting in every direction. But I can stop you. Her arms flail, and she starts to climb up the rock pile toward us. No, I shout, launching myself at Miss Humala and knocking us both off the rock pile. I feel a snap beneath me as I land on her arm and we crash to the ground. Maria Carmen slides down the rock pile behind me. Miss Humala, stop, she pleads. We can help you stop her, I say, getting up and holding out my hands. Miss Humala stands holding an arm that hangs at an unnatural angle. Her shoulders shudder as she sighs. She'll grow weak if... Miss Humala stops and presses her lips together. Miss Humala shakes her head. Maria Carmen says, tell us, what? She shakes her head as tears fall from her cheeks. If she gains power from biting an animal, the opposite holds true as well. Oh, so if animals bite her, she loses power. Well, that ought to be pretty easy to arrange. I hear a scream echo off the quarry walls. It sounds a lot like Talib. Maria Carmen and I run from Miss Humala. I see her scramble up the quarry wall and disappear into the woods. Climbing to the edge of the quarry, Maria Carmen and I peek into the woods. Maria Carmen gasps and covers her mouth. Talib and Brandon lie on the ground, eyes closed, large red welts burning their necks. Rufus is wrapped in a spider silk cocoon, unconscious. Is Rufus the bear? Can't quite remember. Was Rufus the bear? Yeah. The eclipse is upon us, the Tule Vieja says, seething. Just one bite, and I will have your power. I look up at the sky. The sun casts a thin, silvered crescent from behind the moon. The Tule Vieja takes a long, bony finger and drags it along the side of the spider cocoon, exposing Rufus's torso. Long fangs grow from her teeth, glistening in what light the sun still radiates. She snaps her head back and plunges her fangs into his body. He shudders and squirms under the tight silk threads, withdrawing from her prey. The Tule Vieja wipes her mouth with the back of her hand, her fangs retracting into her gums. Her body begins to shudder as spotted golden fur sprouts from her skin. The bones in her hands crack as they form into paws with sharp claws on the end, and her ears twitch into furry black points. That isn't good, says Maria Carmen, whispering next to me. Just as quickly as they sprouted, though, the Tule Vieja's claws push back into her hands and her ears round out and fur falls from her body. She's human again. The sun is still peeking out in the smallest sliver from behind the moon. The Tule Vieja was too early. No, she cries, her voice echoing off the quarry walls. I reach for a rock near me and throw it straight at her. It thuds against the back of her head. She stumbles forward and spins to face me. As I crawl over the edge of the quarry, the whites of her eyes are completely blood red, her skin a scaly gray. Whoa. Her shoulders heave as she catches her breath. Her eyes narrow at me and a sick smile grows from the corner of her mouth. There's her sick smile. My dear, I don't think you realize the gift you've given me, she says. Why would I want a bobcat's power when I can have yours? Oh, actually, Rufus must have been the bobcat. I swallow hard, then let him go. You don't need him, I shout, hoping the shaking in my voice doesn't betray my fear. She moves slowly toward me. So eager to sacrifice yourself for them, she says, waving a bony hand at Talib and Brandon lying on the ground. Behind them lie a squirrel, the armadillo, and a fox, all wrapped in cocoons and paralyzed by spider bites. I grab a larger rock and clench it in my fist. Let them all go. The smile on the Tule Vieja's face exposes yellow, jagged teeth, and a sinister chuckle rises from her throat. I don't know how sinister that was. Kind of a sickly chuckle. Imagine if I could do what you can do. Talk to them all. Understand them. They'd be powerless against me. The Tule Vieja paces in front of the injured Rufus, closing the distance between us. My fist closes tightly on the rock in my hand. She inches toward me and I launch the rock at her. She winces as it hits her thigh, but keeps advancing. I spot Maria Carmen out of the corner of my eye, crawling up out of the quarry and inching toward the bobcat behind the Tule Vieja's back. The Tule Vieja clicks her tongue. She looks up at the sky. The moon has completely covered the sun. An electric ring bursts around the shadow of the moon. I have 6 minutes until the total eclipse passes. I think about what Miss Humala said. If the Tule Vieja gets power from biting animals, then the opposite is true. Does that mean she'll lose her powers if the animals bite her? It's time, the Tule Vieja cries. She rushes at me. No, I throw my body at her, knocking her to the ground. She pushes me off, digging her fingers into my shoulders. I stand between my friends and the Tule Vieja. You're not hurting any of us. The Tule Vieja purses her lips. Do you notice how long it takes for him to tell the animals to bite her? This is the part where the author is making us suffer. We want the animals to bite her. We know they're supposed to bite her, but the author just won't rush to that part because they want to make us feel the excitement of the moment as if we're there, kind of like a movie. So you can see what's going on, you can hear it, you know where everybody is in this scene. Think about that when you're writing your story. She looks up at the eclipse, still in full formation. She purses her lips, her red eyes flash, and she lunges at me. Pinning me to the ground, she blows her hot breath in my face. I groan and struggle against the Tule Vieja. Just don't hurt them. If you let my friends go, I'll let you bite me, I managed to say, hoping that a rhinoceros will charge out of the woods and demolish the Tule Vieja so I don't have to keep my end of the bargain. Crouching down, the Tule Vieja whispers in my ear, who says I won't just take your little friends when I'm done with you anyway? I squirm underneath her as her front teeth grow into snake fangs. My body begins to tremble and shake. I can hear my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Pa-pump, pa-pump, pa-pump. Do you see how the author is making us suffer? Do you feel it? How this time has slowed down? We've been here like forever. I want you to do this with your stories. Find the exciting part, slow it down, say what you feel, your heartbeat, say what you're thinking about, the other animals, say what's going on, what you see, the fangs growing. I snap my head toward the woods. That's a tiny action, isn't it? But it helps you see what he's doing. Searching for some sign of the animals who helped us earlier. Brandon and Talib are still on the ground, paralyzed by the Tule Vieja's spider bite. Maria Carmen is trying to free Rufus, but can't cut through the spider silk, her hands red from trying. I look up at the sky and see Cuervito soaring above us. Oh man, oh man, oh man, he exclaims, circling the eclipse. Get help, I choke out. The Tule Vieja leans in close to my neck. I feel the sharp point of her fangs press against my skin. I squeeze my eyes shut, waiting for her bite, helpless to stop it. I hear hoofbeats to my right, and the Tule Vieja is thrown off of me in a blur of fangs and antlers. I roll over and crouch on the ground. A large buck stands between, that's a male deer with the antlers, between the Tule Vieja and me, hooves scratching the ground, antlers lowered. Tule Vieja is crumpled on the ground, pawing at the rocks around her. The total eclipse is starting to break. No, I need you. I can't waste this time. This is my last chance. She slams her fist in the ground and scrambles toward the buck. The coyote bursts out of the wood and lunges at the Tule Vieja's face, scratching her along the cheek. A burst of orange flames erupts along the lines of the cuts. I run over to Maria Carmen and the bobcat, my hands still shaking. A scream rips through the air. The Tule Vieja is lying on the ground. Her long fingers clawing in the dirt as her body shudders. The scales on her skin are growing thick and brown. Her body is growing longer and longer. With one final scream, she transforms into a snake. Run, the buck shouts to us. The Tule Vieja hisses and slithers towards Talib and Brandon. Cuervito flies at her and sinks his talons right behind her thick head. Val stands in front of Talib and Brandon and growls at the Tule Vieja. He turns and licks the spider bites on their neck. They begin to stir. Chela runs over to Talib and Brandon, helping them up with a nudge of her head. Get them home, I tell her. They lean on her torso, still shaking their heads from the effects of the spider venom, and stumble off into the woods. We need to finish this, Nestor, the buck tells me. Val has the Tule Vieja pinned to the ground with his paws. She snaps her fangs inches from his nose, spewing his face with spit. He sinks his teeth into her neck. Another fiery burst shoots from the puncture wound, and the Tule Vieja's eyes grow round, turning from snake to Wolverine. That's it, I say. She gets weaker every time she's bitten. The Tule Vieja whips her tail around the coyote's torso and squeezes, forcing him to release her. Val backs away from the Tule Vieja and growls, baring his teeth and lunging at the snake, but she slams her thick tail into his body, sending him flying into a large tree. The Tule Vieja rockets toward me and the buck. I pick up a large stick and smash it across her face. She whips her tail and wraps it around my body, crushing my arm so I can't move. Bite, I cry, hoping the animals nearby will hear me. You have to bite. The snake lifts her head and stares her wolverine eyes into mine. Oh, I plan to, my dear, I plan to. The Tule Vieja looks up and sees the moon beginning to move past the sun again, breaking the corona. The corona is the circle around the sky, or around the moon. There's no more time, she hisses. I've always wanted to be able to talk to my prey. Her long fangs draw closer to my face as her jaws grow wider and wider. It looks like she's going to swallow me whole. I look past the Tule Vieja's gaping mouth and see the buck stomp down on her tail with his hoof, forcing her to release her hold on me. The buck lowers his head, scooping up the Tule Vieja in his antlers, and with a sharp flick of his neck sends her flying into the woods. I'm getting tired of this witch, he says. You and me both, I mutter, sucking in a breath. We have to get everyone we can to bite her. That's the only way to take away her power. You got it, a squirrel says, scampering to my side. I'll spread the word. Let everyone know. We hear a scream erupt from the woods, and the Tule Vieja's snake form bursts from the trees. She rockets toward me, and I roll to the side to avoid her exposed fangs. The buck plunges his antlers into the ground around her, trapping the snake. Cuervito soars down and pecks the Tule Vieja's back with his beak. Small flames shoot out of her scales, and tufts of black fur shoot up in their place. The Tule Vieja squirms and hisses as Val approaches, his small, sharp teeth bared. He bites into her side over and over again, sending bright sparks into the air. Furry legs sprout from her body as she continues to push against the buck's antlers. Val lunges at the Tule Vieja, growling, and sinks his teeth just behind her head. Her round snout turns pointed as whiskers grow from her scales and furry ears push from her head. Kicking her legs, the snake, now almost completely transformed into a wolverine, pushes against the buck's antlers and frees herself from the ground. She snarls at the animals encircling her, looking for an opportunity to bite. Maria Carmen and I hear huffs coming from the woods, and a large black form emerges from the trees. You have to bite her, go, go, Maria Carmen shouts at the bear. The massive bear lumbers toward the Tule Vieja, covered in scales and fur, and wraps his arms around her. He sinks his teeth into her neck. A burst of light fills the quarry's edge, and I squint my eyes shut. A scream rips through the air as the bear pushes the Tule Vieja to the edge of the cliff, her feet clawing frantically in the dirt. Releasing his bite from her neck, the bear slams his paws into the Tule Vieja's chest. This is a very violent scene. She falls down the edge of the quarry, flailing as she drops. Her body smacks on a jagged rock on the quarry floor, and a snap echoes through the air. Maria Carmen and I run to the cliff's edge and look down. The Tule Vieja's body lies at unnatural angles between two large boulders. We hold our breath, waiting for some sign of movement, but none comes. She's gone. She didn't turn human, Maria Carmen says. She's kept growing weaker, but she never turned back into a human. Maybe she never was a human, I say, shuddering at the thought. The quarry fills with light as the sun breaks out from behind the moon. The eclipse is over. The shadow of the Tule Vieja's body stretches along the rocks as the increasing sunlight sharpens her shadow into spider webs stretching through the quarry. And that is the end of chapter 25. And we just have one little chapter left tomorrow, and we'll be done with our story.
What's it?